It was the kind of rain that makes you feel like the city is apologizing for something. I know that now. At the time, I just stood at my door in socks, half awake, holding a baseball bat I had grabbed on instinct, and immediately felt ridiculous about. She was standing in the hallway, soaked through. Hair plastered flat, mascara somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. And the way she said it, "I have nowhere else to go," wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a scene. It was quieter than that. The way someone says a true thing they've spent a long time hoping they wouldn't have to say. I lowered the bat, which I probably should have led with. My name is Daniel Reeves. I was 31, a structural inspector for a small civil engineering firm, which means I spend most of my days looking at things people built and deciding whether they'll hold. There's a rhythm to it that suited me. You look at a thing, you assess it, you write down what you find. No one asks you how you feel about it. I had lived in apartment 4C of the Whitmore building on Lakeshore for 11 months, long enough to know which step on the staircase creaked, which neighbor burned popcorn every Thursday night, and which elevator worked. She lived in 4B, directly across the hall. I knew her name was Claire because it was on her mailbox, and I had collected her mail once when the postman left it in mine by mistake. We had exchanged maybe 6 sentences since I moved in. That was my fault more than hers. After my last relationship ended, and I say ended the way a doctor says concluded, meaning cleanly, meaning nobody yelled, meaning it was the kind of quiet dissolution that's almost worse because there's nothing to point at. I had gotten very good at small circumferences. My apartment, the firm. The grocery store on Wednesday evenings when it wasn't crowded. I wasn't unhappy. I was managed. I had learned the difference and told myself it was the same thing. She was Elena. That's the name I won't say much more than once. Not because I'm bitter about it, because I've just worn the groove smooth, and there's nothing useful left in it. We were together for 3 years. She left in November, which is the worst month to have someone leave because everything is already dying. She said I was hard to reach. She said it kindly, which made it harder. I think she was right. I think that's the part I never fully sat with until later. She wasn't wrong about what I was. She just didn't want to wait for me to figure out how to be different. After that, I got good at the small circumferences. I wasn't unhappy. I told myself I was fine, and mostly believed it. Fine is a manageable state. Fine doesn't ask anything of you. I had been fine for 8 months, and I was getting better at it every day, which tells you everything about how that was going. The thing about a woman standing soaked in your hallway at 2 in the morning is that it eliminates small talk. I stepped back from the door. She came in. I got her a towel, the big one, the gray one I'd been meaning to replace for 2 years, and she pressed it against her face for a long moment. I stood in my kitchen pretending to be very interested in whether I had tea. I did have tea. I have always had tea. You can sit down, I said. Thank you. She sat on the couch. She pulled her knees up, which made her look smaller than she actually was, and she held the towel in her lap like she wasn't sure she'd earned the right to use it. Do you want to tell me what happened? I said. Or do you want to sit here for a while first? She looked at me like I had said something unexpected. The second one, she said, if that's okay. That's fine, I said, and it was. I brought her the tea anyway. She wrapped both hands around the mug and stared at the middle distance. I sat in the chair across from her, not on the couch, which I made a deliberate point of, and I waited. I'm good at waiting. It's most of my job. Her name was Claire Samuels, 33, a copy editor for a legal publishing house, which she explained by saying she read things very carefully for a living and still missed things that were right in front of her. I would think about that later. At the time, I just nodded. She had the kind of face that was honest about what it was feeling, not theatrical, just present. Her eyes were dark brown and slightly swollen, and she wasn't trying to hide that she'd been crying, but she also wasn't leaning into it. She cried, and now she was done, and here she was. What stood out first was how still she was. Not numb, still, like someone who had assessed the situation accurately and decided that whatever she was feeling could wait in an orderly line. Your building is bigger than I thought, she said finally, looking around. It's the same building you live in. I know. I just never saw it from this side. She half smiled. It was small. It cost something. Your couch is nicer than mine. It's terrible, I said. I got it from a guy on the internet who said it was barely used. He lied. He lied, I agreed. She looked at me again. Something settled in her expression, like a small decision had been made. His name is Marcus, she said. My boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. Tonight's the night that word changed. She paused. He has a key. I understood that. Not just as information, but as the thing underneath it. She wasn't afraid of him coming back that night. She told me so, directly, before I could ask. She just didn't want to be in a space that still had the shape of him in it. You can stay, I said. I'll take the chair. You take the bedroom. I'm not taking your bedroom. Then we'll argue about it until one of us falls asleep on this terrible couch, I said. And given the structural integrity of the cushions, I'd rather it be you. She laughed. Quietly, but she laughed. And it was the first real thing that had happened in a long time that wasn't just me being efficient. I should explain the building. The Whitmore is old enough to have charm and new enough to be expensive about it. 12 floors, 2 elevators, a courtyard no one uses except the super's dog. The 4th floor has 6 apartments. In the 11 months since I'd moved in, I had a nodding acquaintance with 2 of them. The man in 4A, older, retired, grew tomatoes on his balcony with the focused intensity of a man who had decided to win at something small. The woman in 4D, whose name I didn't know, who played piano imprecisely and enthusiastically on Sunday mornings, which I had decided a long time ago was optimistic rather than annoying. Claire had moved into 4B 8 months before that night. I know because I heard the movers. I know because I held the elevator for her twice in the first week, and she said thank you and I said sure, and that was the entire thing. Once I'd seen her in the lobby with a man, broad-shouldered, good-looking in the way that announces itself, the kind of man who took up a doorway like he'd calculated the exact center. He had his hand at the small of her back in a way that looked more like placement than affection. I noticed that. I hadn't thought much about why I'd noticed it. Now I was thinking about it. She told me the short version. She'd come home at midnight after working late. She was on deadline for a quarterly index, which apparently mattered more than I would have guessed. And Marcus was there, and he was angry about something that had started small and gotten large the way small things do with certain people. He hadn't touched her. I asked that directly. She shook her head without looking at me. He hadn't needed to. The way she said that made me understand that he knew precisely what he was doing, without ever needing to cross the line that would make him officially accountable. I didn't want to go to a hotel, she said. I didn't want to explain it to anyone I knew. She looked at her mug. You seemed like someone who wouldn't make it strange. That stopped me completely. You decided that from 6 conversations. 4, she said. The elevator twice doesn't count. Those were barely half sentences. She glanced up. You always stepped out of the way when I was carrying things. You didn't make a point of it. You just moved and kept going. She paused. That tells you something. I sat with that for a moment. There it was. Not chivalry, not performance, just the fact of noticing someone carrying something and getting out of their way. She had been watching that. She had filed it away and pulled it out on the worst night of her recent life and decided it was enough to knock on a near stranger's door in the rain. The idea of that, the smallness of what it took to be trusted, and how rarely I'd thought about whether I was trustworthy in the small ways, settled somewhere uncomfortable behind my sternum. You can stay, I said again, more quietly this time. She stayed. She slept in my room. I took the chair, which was not as bad as the couch but was not good, and I lay there listening to the rain ease off and turning over what she'd said. You seemed like someone who wouldn't make it strange. What she meant was that I was safe. I knew that was true, and I knew it was a good thing to be. I also knew, in the way you know things at 2 in the morning that you'd reason yourself out of by daylight, that I had made myself safe the way you board up a window. Efficient, keeps the weather out, not built for anything to come through. I fell asleep somewhere around 4. When I woke at 7, the rain had stopped and there was the smell of coffee. I found her in my kitchen. No one had been in my kitchen except me for 11 months, standing at the counter in yesterday's clothes, hair braided loosely over one shoulder, using my French press with the focused competence of someone who had not arrived at good coffee accidentally. You had good beans, she said, without turning around. I have one vice, I said. I found 2. She set a mug on the counter in front of me. You also have a very good cast iron skillet that someone gave you, and you never use. How do you know someone gave it to me? She pointed to the bottom of the pan, which she had evidently already lifted to check. The initials from the gift sticker were still faintly visible on the underside. It's still in the original oil coat. You were afraid to ruin it. She said it without judgment. That was the part I noticed. She just named the thing and moved on, the way someone does when they're not building a case against you. She named it the way she might note that the coffee beans were Ethiopian. Just a fact. just something she'd seen. The skillet was from my sister, I said. Housewarming gift when I moved in. You should use it, she said. Things get worse when you don't use them. I was fairly sure she wasn't only talking about the skillet. I let it go, but I thought about it. She stayed 3 days. I want to be careful about what those 3 days were and what they weren't. Nothing happened. I mean that in the cleanest possible sense. She slept in my room. I slept in the chair. Then the second night she made me take the bed and took the couch herself, insisting it was better than it looked. This was not true. We ate together. We worked in the same space. She had her laptop open to a legal manuscript. I had mine open to assessment reports, in the specific kind of comfortable silence that doesn't need to be filled because it's already full. On the second evening, she asked me about the structural inspection work. I started to give her the party version, the short one, and she said, "No, what does it actually mean when you say something won't hold?" So I told her the real version, about the small deformations that predict the large failures, about how a crack in a load-bearing wall isn't just a crack, it's information, if you know how to read it. About how the most dangerous buildings are the ones that look completely fine from the street. About how my job is essentially to find the thing that's been quietly failing before it fails loudly. She listened the way she did everything, with full attention, not the performance of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "That's what you do," she said. "Look at things and figure out what they're hiding, more or less." "Do you ever look at the ones that are fine?" she asked. "Or mostly the ones that aren't?" I thought about it honestly. "Mostly the ones that aren't," I said. "That's where the work is." She nodded once, slowly. "I think I've been doing that too," she said. "For a while, looking at what's failing instead of what's holding." She set her mug down. I thought I was being realistic. "So did I said. Neither of us said anything after that, but something had shifted in the room, and we both knew it, and neither of us moved to name it. That was all right. Some things don't need to be named to be real. On the third morning, I woke up early and lay in the dark of my room. She had taken the chair that night, insisting, and I had stopped arguing, and thought about what it meant that this felt natural. 3 days. We had known each other, really known each other, for 3 days, and there was something in the air of the apartment that felt different. Not romantic exactly, not yet, but inhabited, like the rooms had remembered what they were supposed to be for. I thought about Elena for the first time in months. Not painfully, just honestly. She had been right that I was hard to reach. I had been hard to reach because I'd decided, somewhere along the way, that being reachable meant being losable, and I'd rather be unreachable than lost. That had been a very logical and very lonely decision. I hadn't known how lonely until someone was in the next room reading a legal manuscript, and I was sitting here understanding that the walls had gotten thinner. That scared me a little. I sat with that too. The third day she found out Marcus had boxed some of her things and left them with the building super. Not vindictively, just terminally, the way some people close a door by walking through it and not looking back. She sat on my couch when she found out, holding her phone, and she didn't cry. She stared at the floor for a moment. "I should feel worse," she said. "That's the part that's confusing me." "Maybe you did most of your grieving already," I said, while it was still happening. She looked at me. Something in her face went quiet in a different way than I'd seen before. Not the careful stillness from the first night. Something gentler. "Yeah," she said, after a long moment. "I think I did." She packed up her tote bag that evening. She stood at my door. We were back in the hallway. The same hallway. The same 12 feet of carpet between 4B and 4C. The same distance we'd maintained for almost a year. Only now we had 3 days in between. "Thank you," she said, "for not making it strange." "You're across the hall," I said. "If something comes up," she smiled. Not the small, careful one from the first night, the one I'd been watching develop over 3 days, the one that had space in it. "I know where to find you," she said. She crossed the hall. Her door closed. I stood there for a moment in my doorway, in my socks. Then I went inside and sat on my terrible couch and understood, slowly, that something in me had shifted. Not dramatically, not the way I'd always imagined shifts happen, when I'd imagined them at all. Quietly, the way a building settles, barely perceptible, but permanent. The way a structure finally finds the level it was supposed to be at from the beginning. I sat there for a while, not managing anything, not being efficient, just sitting with it, which was new. The following 2 weeks were an education in proximity. We were across the hall from each other. We had always been across the hall from each other, but now that meant something different. I heard her keys in the lock when she came home. She heard mine. We ran into each other at the elevator 3 times, and each time it was both awkward and not awkward, which is a very specific feeling. Once she held the elevator for me, she didn't make a point of it. I noticed. I found reasons to be in the hallway. I am not proud of this, but I am at least honest about it. I took my recycling out in 2 separate trips because I timed the first one wrong. I stood at my mailbox longer than anyone has ever needed to stand at a mailbox. On the 9th day, she knocked on my door. Just to return my French press, she said. She'd borrowed it because hers had broken, and she'd ordered a new one, and it had arrived. She handed it over. She didn't leave immediately. "How was your week?" she asked. "Productive," I said. And then, because the word came out completely dead and hollow, "That's not true. It was long." "Mine too." She leaned against the doorframe. She had a quality of attention that made you feel very seen when it was directed at you. I was aware of it. "I keep almost knocking," she said. "You should have," I said. I kept deciding I was being too much. "You're not," I said. "You weren't." She looked at me for a moment, unhurried, just looking, the way she did. "Okay," she said. She stayed for 2 hours. We didn't do anything notable. She sat at my kitchen table, and I used the cast iron skillet for the first time, which she supervised without being asked, and which turned out to be the correct decision. We ate dinner at the kitchen table and talked about her work and mine, and the man in 4A's tomatoes, which had apparently been showing real promise for weeks. It was ordinary. It was the best thing that had happened to me in a year. 2 weeks after that, I knocked on 4B at 7 in the evening, which is a deliberate hour. Not so late it's a question. Not so early, it's an announcement. She opened the door in reading glasses I hadn't seen before, and a red pen behind her ear. She was in the middle of something. "Hi," she said. "I made extra from dinner," I said. It was not entirely a lie. I had made extra on purpose, which is a related but different thing. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Daniel." "Yes." "Did you make extra on purpose?" A pause. "Yes." She took the glasses off, set them on top of her head, looked at me with that clear, unhurried attention she brought to everything. Then she stepped back from the door and said, "Come in." It has been 14 months since the night in the rain. We live in 4C now, together, which required a long conversation about kitchen organization, a negotiation about the couch. I won, meaning it went to charity, and she chose the new one, and a decisive moment involving the cast iron skillet, which she has taught me to use correctly. It has not been ruined. Things don't always get ruined when you use them. I'm still learning that. She still edits legal copy. I still look at what things are hiding. Most mornings we have coffee at the same counter, and she catches me watching her read and pretends not to notice, and I pretend I wasn't. We've gotten very good at seeing each other. That sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the whole thing. I asked her once what made her knock on my door specifically that night. Of all the doors on the 4th floor, she thought about it. "You always moved out of the way when I was carrying things," she said. Without making a point of it. "You just did it." She paused. "And there was something about you, like you were waiting for something, but you'd gotten very quiet about it." She looked at me. "I thought you could probably use the company." She was right. She usually is. Not because she's trying to be. Because she pays attention. That is the whole of it. 2 people who learn to read what the other one was actually saying underneath the thing they said. That's most of love. Once you get past the part that feels like falling. The staying part. The choosing. Every ordinary day after the extraordinary one. The cast iron skillet is on the stove right now, seasoned properly, which took 4 uses and 1 patient lesson I should have sat through a year earlier. Some things get better when you use them. Some things were always going to be good. You just had to stop being afraid of ruining them. What would you have done if your neighbor showed up at your door at 2 a.m. in the rain, with nowhere else to go, and you were each other's best choice without knowing it yet? And have you ever found something real in a place you'd completely stopped expecting to look? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.